Welcome to the Awesome Marriage Podcast. We are so glad that you're joining us today. I am your podcast co-host, Lindsay Few, and in the studio with me today is Dr. Kim Kimberling, and we're ready to talk about today's topic, the cost of being right in marriage. So marriage conflict is hard already, but you know what makes it even harder? Trying to win. Because if that happens, it means your spouse loses. And that's not good for your marriage connection. So today, we're going to unpack the process of what it means to win for your marriage when you argue. So, Dr. Kim, will you start by just letting us have a little sneak peek into what fighting to win looked like for you and Nancy in your early years of marriage?
Yeah, it wasn't good. I mean, it just was not. We're both type A. We're both competitive. And so our early, if you look back, thank goodness I can't remember all of them, but it was mostly a win-lose situation. And we were both digging our heels in. We did unhealthy things. I did probably more than Nancy did on this of throwing the divorce word around because that would kind of, I don't know, shock us to reality, but it damaged the relationship. We didn't know how to listen to each other. You know, it was like, okay, as soon as she shuts up, I'm going to tell her what's really going to make a difference here. You know, it's like I didn't hear a thing she said because I was figuring out what I was going to say as soon as she quit talking. So, and we didn't resolve issues. It was interesting. We'd kind of have a fight, get mad at each other, probably yell and scream some, not speak to each other for a couple of days, kind of miss each other, kind of go back to just living life. And then it should come up again because we never resolved it. Or something similar would come up, or we never knew how to resolve issues. So we had this pile of issues that was stacking up that we'd never really addressed, and they kept cycling back through. And so, no, it was like, and I think we both thought the same thing. It's like if he would listen to me,
right,
this would be okay if we do it my way. And I was the same with her. If she would, what is wrong with this woman? Everybody else respects what I'm saying. What's wrong with her? You know, it's like, if she would just listen to me, we would have such a good marriage. And so it became win-lose, fights that things not resolved. And I think the most damaging was throwing the word divorce around just out of frustration, just knowing that would hurt the other person.
Yeah, not a pretty picture.
So what about you guys? I'm sure y'all didn't ever fight.
Oh, boy. Nothing you just said rung any bells. No, we were working from the same playbook. And I think it's just a lot of immaturity. We didn't know how to resolve anything. We didn't even try. It's like you said, we were just trying to make the other person see things my way. And when you do that, it's just win or lose. And so there's no resolution because it's like, you got to admit you're wrong. You just have to admit you're wrong and I'm right. Nobody wants to do that.
No.
Yeah. But then one thing that we encountered a lot was a lot of the things we fought over, there wasn't even a right answer. It was just kind of like some irrelevant topic would get us stirred up. And it's like, really what's happening, there's a different issue. We don't feel heard. We don't feel connected. We don't feel respected. We don't feel loved, whatever. And it's coming out sideways through some stupid topic that has no bearing on anything, but somehow we just don't know how to bring things up, resolve things. And so, we did the same pattern, get real heated, say stupid things, get mad, slam the door. I was the door slammer. And then just wait a couple days until it kind of blows over and then just acknowledge nothing and move forward.
No, you kind of, well, I forgot, I kind of still do like her a lot and I want to be close to her. And so, okay, let's just do that, you know?
Yeah.
I think you're right. A lot of immaturity and just to learn about life and marriage. I mean, we've got to realize that just doesn't work like that. But so many couples do go through that at some level, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I've heard a lot of people feel really familiar with those types of themes too, unfortunately. But the good news is we're in this together. We've learned some things and there are a lot better ways to handle it. And I think today what we're getting into is really going to help give just some practical steps towards stopping this cycle, this frustrating cycle, and then getting onto a better track.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it came to this, I mean, I know you said you guys had this fighting pattern for a while. What helped you change out of that win-lose fight pattern?
I think we realized it's not working, and it wasn't working. It was kind of like, you know, because I think after it brought the same thing came up 5 or 6 times, but the sixth time, I mean, we were pros at arguing about that and not changing and not listening and all those kind of things. And so I think that was one realization, and that's when we went to counseling. And then I think the other was when we took divorce off the table. That
Mm,
was a huge change for us, because to us it was, okay, if that's not an option, then we do have to figure this out, because I don't want
mhm.
to fight with you like this
Right.
for 50 or 60 years. I just don't want to do that. And so we
Yeah.
had to, at that
Yeah.
point, figure it out. We had a great counselor that helped us in those early years, that really got us on the right track with some things. And then I think we began our relationship together with God, and we'd always prayed together. But I think
Mm,
that began to take on kind of a new take for us too, and somehow knowing that this is not what God planned for our marriage, and this isn't honoring Him, and it's certainly
mm.
not honoring each other in this situation. So I think it's kind of a combination of things, but I think the first was when we finally acknowledged the red flag that this is not working, guys. We got to do something
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, it's interesting that you mentioned that taking divorce off the table was kind of the catalyst for, okay, since we're not doing that, we do have to figure out a better way because this way
Hmm.
isn't working.
Yes,
Yeah, I think I've heard that. That sort of idea is like you know, I've heard it come out as, yeah, we don't know how to resolve things. Maybe I married the wrong person. And that's kind of a different way of saying the same thing.
I think that is very true sometimes. I think of a woman, I think I wrote about her a little bit in Seven Secrets, but it was till as after her third marriage that she realized I married the wrong person again, and realized maybe it's me too. Maybe I have a part
Mm,
in this. But it took the
mm,
third marriage for her to get there.
mm.
So don't let that happen. Figure it out now.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's great. So hopefully we can do that today. So first of all, would you explain the difference between winning an argument and a marriage win?
Yes. I think a marriage win is when both of you, I guess, you find a solution that you've gone through the process. You feel like my spouse heard me, they
Mhm.
respected me, and this is something that we both are comfortable with. It's not the
Mhm.
focus goes off of who's right or wrong, those kind of things, but it's working together to resolve the issue in a way
Mhm.
that's going to strengthen the marriage relationship. Well, that's
Mhm.
a marriage win, as
Mhm.
opposed to winning. There's anytime you get to winning, there's a winner and a loser.
Mhm.
The key distinction is the outcome, because if you look at just sports, anything, a win or a traditional winning as we define it in our culture is a winner and a loser.
Yeah.
And the marriage win creates two winners and a strong relationship. So I thought of a couple of examples. So maybe you fight about household chores a lot. So
Mhm.
instead of proving your point. Okay, this is why, or whatever it is you're trying to do, sit down together and say, okay, how do we divide the chores up that works for both of us? What's going to be fair? Okay, neither one of us
Mhm.
want to do toilets, so let's alternate that every week, and come together on it. Couples argue about finances all the time. A lot of fights about finances. Instead of just continue arguing about that, when the credit card bill comes in the month and you're throwing things at each other again, I can't believe it's like this, that you sit
Mhm.
down and work together and create a budget. You put each one of your needs and concerns are part of that budget, and you've solved the problem. And it's something as simple as, I've had couples fight over where they're going on vacation because my place is better than your place. Instead
Mhm.
of sitting down and saying, okay, let's find something that we both will enjoy doing. And we talk about
Mhm.
those other things. We'll put those on the side. Maybe we'll go there someday, or maybe we won't. Let's find something that we know is going to be something that we both enjoy this year, because I don't want to be on a trip where I feel like I gave in and you're getting your way, and, blah, blah, blah. Find
Mhm.
something that works for both of you. So I
Mhm.
think it's that those are ways I think where your marriage wins, when you take the time to listen to each other, to come together, and to make a decision that's good for each one of you and good for the marriage. And winning is just a win or loser thing, and that never works.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so it's more of the compromise, collaboration, teamwork
Yeah,
rather than going against each other.
exactly. Exactly. It's about us as a couple instead of me or you as individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what's really interesting about this, Dr. Kim, is it's like this is one of those things that before you get married, it seems simple. Like when we are married, we're going to be, these great people who can work together. We're going to collaborate. We're going to be teammates. We're going to be best friends. It's going to go great. But the reality is, it's not that simple. So why is this so hard for couples to get?
Oh, I think we're selfish, for one thing. I mean, I think it's something I've talked about a
Hmm.
lot. I think it's the biggest problem in as humans. It goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden and the
Yeah.
selfishness of choosing self over what God wanted them to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's just part of who we are and what we have to get rid of. And selfishness in a marriage just doesn't work. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but I think most couples have to go through that because we kind of want our way. I think sometimes too, I think when couples, as you were saying, come together, I think, oh, we're going to do everything right and everything. We don't take into account the differences that we bring into marriage,
Yeah.
and whether it's family origin, previous relationships, things we've read, talked about, and everything. And those begin to come out in a marriage relationship. And then all of a sudden it's like, who are you? So we don't
Yeah.
accept those differences. And so then it's hard to listen to them or to value them. And so I think it all spins out of selfishness. And then instead of embracing differences because of our selfishness, we push them away. We don't accept them, and I'm right and you're wrong. So I'm not going to listen to
Mm-hmm.
you. And so I think those all go into why it's hard to do that, where the answer is really just, okay, how do you serve each other? How do you have
Mm-hmm.
a marriage that models what Christ did for the church, which means dying to self
Mm-hmm.
and embracing the other person? And so until we get to that, I think it's so easy to fall back. I fall back into selfishness. I did a couple of weeks ago. I was aware of it. Didn't last long, but I knew that's where I was headed. So I just told her, I'm being selfish. I want to be selfish right now. I said,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to work out of this, but I just want you to know that I'm aware
That
of
is
what I'm
helpful that
doing.
you're aware.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm aware of what I'm doing. I'm trying to swim out of this thing.
Mm.
Just hang on, stay away from me if you need to, whatever. I
Yeah.
understand, but
That's good. That's good.
I'm going to get there. But so, I mean, it's just, there's time. Yeah. It's just, maybe sometimes when we're tired or we're just frustrated or something, and it's so much easier.
Mm.
I want the world to revolve around me for about 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't usually help relationships. I'd rather let
No.
the world revolve around us together
Yeah.
with Nancy come along beside me in those difficult situations. That's what my goal would be to get to.
Yeah. No, I think that's so good that awareness and just like what you said, just saying it to Nancy, I think that's so funny because that's just a really helpful piece of information, like
Yeah.
I'm struggling, I'm feeling selfish because the reality is a lot of times I think we don't become aware that we are being selfish. I think we just think, well, this is what I want and there's nothing wrong with wanting that,
You're
you
right.
know, because we
Right. We
are
justify it.
right. And there's certainly times where the things we want and need are fine, but when they come up against our spouse and it becomes a conflict, well, there we have to figure out a way not to let selfishness win. And I think you're so right too. I've seen this in myself with when I've been over busy, I've been overbooked, I've crammed too much to the schedule, everything's
Yeah.
happening, and I notice after session or week or whatever, a time like that, I can see in myself easily. I'm like, I do not want to be serving others right now. I do not want to be laying down my preferences. I want to be served. I feel like I even deserve it. And so
Yeah.
in those times where we're over busy, we might not even realize how much that's affecting our selfishness.
I think that's true. And I think that's this kind of a rabbit trail a little bit, but I think that's where you give each other permission to call each other out in a loving
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Hey, this is what I'm seeing. What's going on there? I think,
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking, you've been a little gripey, but I was kind of getting mad at you. But then I started thinking, oh my gosh, look what she had to do the last 3 days. And I think she's gotten maybe 5 hours of sleep the last 3 nights. And so
Mm-hmm.
that can give her grace. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
taking the time to do that. But I do think it helps. We've gotten the habit of sharing with each other if something's going on. If I'm feeling selfish or tired or,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I just had a really rough day, whatever. Just inform your spouse so then they
Mm-hmm.
can figure out how to best come alongside you at that time. Does he
Yeah.
need some time alone? Does she need some time alone? Do I
Mm-hmm.
need to just be sitting there beside them? Do we need to talk through this? Those kind of
Mm-hmm.
things. That's where you want to get to.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's a lot more effective.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So okay, we've tackled selfishness pretty hard, and that's just going to be something we have to fight against,
Yeah.
throughout our marriage. And so when we're getting into conflict resolution, what is the process for a more effective conflict resolution? We know what doesn't work. So what does work?
Yeah. I mean, I think in some, like you were saying, not remembering some of the things you haven't thought about and stuff, I think there's a lot of things that this doesn't really matter. Why am I
Yeah.
fighting her on this or something like that? And you just let it go. And you have to let it go. You can't do that and resent it. So I think that,
Yeah.
but if it's an issue that you really need to resolve, maybe it is a financial issue that keeps coming up.
Mm.
And you guys are, there's not enough money at the end of the month every month, things like that. So you say, okay, we've got to figure this out. We got to quit fighting about it. We've got to quit throwing things at each other, like you threw my credit card statement, and I threw yours at you, and that kind of
Mm.
stuff. And I think you pray, you say, God, we need to resolve this, and we need your help in resolving that. And then I think if you're going to resolve it, you've got to decide a time and a place that works for both of you when you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to be interrupted. That may
Mm-hmm.
be after the kids have gone to bed. That may be you both stay home one morning after the kids are gone to school. Something. Find a time and a place where you got the time to talk through this. And then I
Mm-hmm.
think as you sit down, I think you want to make sure you define the problem, because sometimes I've
Mm-hmm.
had couples that look at the thing just a little bit different. So you got to make sure you're on the same page, so you're both
Mm-hmm.
working on the same problem. And so then discuss some solutions, write them down, kind of brainstorm, and pick one. And it doesn't have to be yours or mine. It's kind of like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
which two of these do you feel like best would help us? And then together pick one of them, and then
Mm-hmm.
try it. And then I think things like it's your finances, and you are spending too much. And so you sit down and you say, okay, we need to cut back $200 a month. And our credit card bills reflect that we're spending probably at least that much in things that maybe we didn't need to buy that much.
Mm-hmm.
So you look together at those, and you see that, I bought a lot of clothes. Well, I did. And so I don't need to buy clothes again for 6 months or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And so, okay, we'll do this. So you begin to do that. And then you kind of evaluate it in a couple of weeks and refine it a little bit. And then, when you come to that month where you've got money in the bank and the credit card bills are paid and all the other bills are paid, celebrate it. Go to
Mm-hmm.
dinner, go have coffee together, go whatever, do something fun together. But I think the point is that you come together, you pray first, you ask God guidance for both of you, and then you go through that process together. And the goal is to find a solution that works that for both of you in that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of apply that to anything. But I think for me, the key for us was making sure we had that time and place where we really had time to think through things, because we had a
Mm-hmm.
tendency to, one of us would get ready to walk out the door. Hey, we need to talk about this. And well, that's not
Right.
going to work, because the
Yeah.
other person's already mentally gone somewhere else. Or that we waited till, that's the one thing where I really messed up. I would kind of put some of those things off until late in the evening. I'd be so tired. And, there were a couple of times I fell asleep during the conversation, which didn't go over really well. And so we
No.
had to find a time that worked for us, and make it a priority. And your goal is we're going to find a solution that works for both of us. And as
Mm-hmm.
you begin to go through that, sometimes it's kind of awkward at first. Sometimes you feel like maybe I'm giving up and I don't want to give up.
Mm-hmm.
But trust the process. And I think you'll get to where, Nancy and I don't even go through the steps anymore. It just kind of comes natural to us
Mm-hmm.
if we've got something we really need to talk about. And obviously now with being empty nest, it's a lot easier to find the time and the place to talk about things than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
It was harder. So sometimes you have to
Yeah.
be very intentional about carving out that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I find, I mean, I'm in the full nest stage still. And I feel like sometimes when the time, like you're like, oh yeah, we need to have this conversation, resolve something. And then the time comes, you're like, oh, we just want to relax because we're like,
I
we
know,
finally have a
exactly.
quiet time. Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing when something bothers you and you think, okay, I know I'll talk about it tonight. And you get home and you're both dead tired, and it's like,
Hmm.
no, I can't do it. So it is good to say, hey, we need to talk about this. Let's find a time when we're both awake and alert and have the
Yes.
time to do it.
Yes. Well, because I think that's one of the strongest things to think about in this process is the fact that it's premeditated. You're not going to have this conversation as an argument. It's not going to be, oh my gosh, the
Right.
credit card statement came in the mail. Look what you did now. I'm going to throw it
Yep.
across the table at you. I'm so mad. There's no resolution in that. You can't resolve things. This is one of my favorite
No,
things I've heard you say is you cannot resolve issues when you are elevated, when you're angry.
no.
And so I don't think that ever crossed my mind when we were in our early marriage. I thought we're mad right now. We're going to argue right now. But that's not a process that's going to bring resolution because you're so heated, you're so
Right.
emotionally elevated.
Yeah, that should get to the point where that's your trigger. Okay, we need to do this needs to be a problem-solving thing. Yelling at
Yes.
each other, being mad, holding on to our anger is not gonna that's not gonna work because 'cause we're not gonna resolve it, you know?
You aren't going to
I'm
resolve it. Yeah.
I may feel like I've punished him or her for a couple
Mhm.
of days, but that didn't
Mhm.
resolve anything. So,
No.
yeah, I think it is, and when you sit down, this is conflict resolution. That's what we
Mhm.
want. We want to resolve this. It puts a whole different spin on it. And
Mhm.
I think it minimizes can over time minimize your fights. I
Mhm.
think it can help you choose your battles better. And then the things that are really important, you really have a plan of how to deal with those in a way that is going to give you resolution.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think it will absolutely reduce your arguments because the things like you described in the beginning of the episode, things would keep coming back up and coming back up because it hadn't been dealt with. So you had this pile of issues. Where if
Right.
you start learning how to actually resolve it, you're not going to have that stuff lingering anymore. You've dealt with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you let go of it. And the deal is we've resolved it and we're not going to bring up the part of it that we fought about before because we've resolved it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so this is a very proactive way to address things instead of waiting until you get, something catches you off guard and you get really heated. You
Yep.
actually can say, "We're going to talk about this as a conflict resolution instead of arguing about this in the heat
Yeah.
of the moment."
And there is, that's one of the best gifts that you can give your marriage is learn to resolve conflict together.
Yeah.
It is huge for the couples do that.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, and so you're not fighting anymore. I mean, you're resolving
Mhm.
conflict and there's such a big difference between those two.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. Practically speaking, if you're going through this process, but you're just kind of really used to doing it my way versus your way, you've just been used to those fights. What are some practical steps a couple can take to learn how to find solutions together instead of my way versus your way?
Well, I think some of it goes with just how you approach it. Being a team. We talk about a team all the time because we know how the difference it makes in a marriage where you're wearing the same jersey and
Hmm.
you're on the same team. I always thought it'd be cool if we had also marriage jerseys to give to men and women and they could wear them
Yeah.
and they know they're on the same team.
Yes.
And I think you also decide what's going to be best for our marriage, what's going to make our marriage win. And so I think
Hmm.
you have that kind of as your template over it. We're a team. Our goal is that our marriage is going to win. Then I think you're going to be willing to compromise. I think that is a huge
Hmm.
step to begin with to compromise and to empathize with your spouse, to put yourself in
Hmm.
their shoes. Because when you do that, I think you begin to listen better. And when you
Hmm.
listen better, if you're listening to your spouse, I think it just diffuses things and you have a deeper understanding. And then you're easier to come to, oh, I get that now, to the
Hmm.
compromise that you want. So I
Yeah.
think it's got to be your mindset to start with, and then just doing some things different instead of looking at your spouse as this enemy that walked into my life. That you're
Hmm.
thinking this is somebody a gift God gave us, and I want to get in her shoes. I want to see this from her perspective for a
Hmm.
while.
Hmm.
Then you're really becoming a team. You're really coming alongside each other,
Yeah.
and that makes a huge difference.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I mean, just this shift that you talk about where you're a team approaching a problem together, that is so helpful. So helpful. And then I think too, I think it's really hard to want to uh, cultivate that empathy and think, oh, what's my spouse going through? What's really their perspective? Because I think we all just naturally, because we're selfish, we want
Yep.
that to be done for us. We want our spouse to do that.
Yes, exactly.
But if we're willing, and either spouse can do it, but if you're willing to step up and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take responsibility for me because I can only control me.
Yep.
That's going to create such a huge shift that it's going to be well worth it. Even if you feel like you may have had to make a sacrifice to get there, it's a worthwhile one.
Absolutely. I think too, I mean, we've talked, it seems like off and on, I've talked about empathy a lot lately in different ways. But
Hmm.
I think the more I talk about it and think about it, I think that is one of the best gifts you can give your marriage to is to really take the time to look at what's going on through your
Mm.
spouse's eyes. What is going on with
Hmm.
them? And I think it just gives to me when I do that with Nancy, it gives me more of an understanding. I think it helps me be more compassionate. It helps me really evaluate the way I'm going to approach her or treat her or
Hmm.
when I do that, she quits being the enemy. I think is what happens in that situation, and she
Mm-hmm.
becomes my wife again. And then it's a lot easier to see ourselves back as that team that wants the best marriage that we can have. So empathy is, I think, something to really pray about and cultivate in a marriage. I think it makes a huge difference because it also helps fight what we talked about of the selfishness.
I think so.
The more I understand her, the less selfish I am towards her. I believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. And because it's really just, again, looking to that person as the spouse God created for you instead of the person who's standing between you and the things you want.
Yeah, exactly. It's an obstacle in my life.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's where our 4-week reframing challenge would help. If you've got your wife or husband focus, if you're looking at them as the enemy,
Hmm.
that'd be a great resource to get.
Yeah, absolutely. That thing is well worth it. It's a biblical process to helping you see things through godly perspective, and it's really
Yeah.
helpful. And scripture is really clear that we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to steward our thought life and take charge of it. And I think too, I've heard recently, this is so concerning to me as a working in the mental health space, but there's kind of a misunderstanding where people are not loving the word empathy. I've heard some people kind of push back on that and go, what is that? Some kind of, touchy feely thing, or what is this? But really, empathy in the Bible, a lot of times is referred to as compassion, forbearance, loving kindness, bearing with one another. Because I heard somebody say, it's not even in the Bible. Well, okay, maybe that word isn't, but there are many other fruits of the Spirit and qualities
Yeah.
that Jesus modeled, which are very clearly the heart of what we're getting here is trying to see somebody through God's perspective, not through a, short sighted, selfish perspective.
Yeah. And Jesus was the master of empathy. Of
Hmm.
course, he was part of him that was fully God. He knew the guy that couldn't get down to the water to get
Hmm.
healed because it took him too long to get there, and he understood that, and he put himself and knows, well, this guy needs healing. I mean, it
Hmm.
just, I can think there's probably all kinds of things in there where Jesus showed the empathy
Oh, yeah.
toward the people around him and understanding. And so I think if we use him as our model, which there's no better, I think empathy, I like empathy. I think it's a pretty good word.
Yeah. Yes, I know. I think if anyone's struggling with the use of that word, we need to go back to what it really means and not what it can be characterized as sometimes.
Yeah. Yes.
But I think that's a good word because just seeing our spouse as God sees them is just going to create so much more compassion there and so much more
Hmm.
togetherness and oneness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is a really helpful process, Dr. Kim. But if a couple has been stuck in ineffective conflict resolution for a long time and they've just been in that cycle, what's their first step to changing that?
Well, I think when you're in that, it's kind of one of the things that we talked about in Seven Secrets book, stopping the insanity. If you're keeping
Mhm.
doing the same thing over and over again, and you're not
Mhm.
getting different results, why do you keep doing it over and over again? So you got to step out of that cycle and
Mhm.
begin to see that. So I think really just, okay, this is not working. Look at this pattern, evaluate that pattern you're in. And then I think counseling would be your next step, is to get somebody to
Mhm.
come alongside you that can guide you, can kind of help you over that. One of the things that we have not talked about in a while, but something that we've used for years, is the stop, look, listen technique. And
Mhm.
I think it's so effective in communication. And basically, if Nancy and I are going to talk about something that's important, I mean, a lot of times we'll talk about stuff, and then she's cooking, and I'll be sitting at the counter, and our backs to me, some and everything, but we're just talking, just
Mhm.
catching up on the day, stuff like that. But if it's important, we want to sit down face to face where we can look in each other's eyes. So we stop what else we were doing. Hey, this is important. We got to talk about this. The time we set aside. We look in each other's eyes, because I think that, to me, I get distracted really easily. And so I
Mhm.
need to look in her eyes. And then you really actively listen to the other person, to her. She speaks, and I say, and I kind of loop back. This is what you meant, right? This is what I got out of that. And if you do that when something comes up to try to clarify, a lot of times that will keep you from ever going to conflict on a topic. It's kind of
Mhm.
catching it early.
Mhm.
And so just getting in that pattern of, really, if something's important to your spouse, making it important to you, and really listening well. And part of that listening well is looping back and making sure that you heard what they were saying. because there's
Mhm.
been times that I'll say something and Nancy will say back to me. I said, no, okay, I need to say that different because
Mhm.
you didn't. I didn't communicate what I wanted you to hear, and so I think that's a technique I wanted to throw in there because I think that something you could begin pick up and start doing. But I think it's okay. We got to step out of this cycle. This
Yeah.
is insanity, and we got to get help. And I would just suggest going to Christian counselor and get some direction. I think that would be a good step
Mhm.
because you don't want to stay in this cycle.
Yes. Yeah, and if you haven't wanted to go to counseling because you're not sure that your situation is bad enough, that's a great time to go.
Absolutely. Don't wait till it gets so bad that it's like the counselor. I thought I've never said this to him. I thought, why didn't you come in 2 years ago?
Yeah.
We would be so far ahead in this thing because you've
Mhm.
continued to do 2 more years of damage to each other because you've just kept fighting about the same things and you're throwing a few
Mhm.
things in there and you're frustrating each other. And I said, that's not going to work. And
Yeah.
so step out of that cycle, get some help. And sometimes I might just meet with somebody 2 or 3 times because they want help. They want to get things right and they've just gotten off track, and you give them a few pointers and things to do and they start doing it
Mhm.
and it works and they think, yeah, this is good. But yeah, don't wait until you're like, okay, who do I call, the counselor or the divorce attorney? Don't wait till that point. Call your
Mm.
counselor, find a
Mhm.
counselor, ask a friend who they went to for Christian counseling, ask your pastor,
Mhm.
and make an appointment.
Yes. Yes. You'll be glad that you did.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Kim, this has been a really information packed episode. I mean, lots of great practical stuff here with all these steps to resolving conflict better, getting out of that terrible cycle. What's the final piece of advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, I love the way you titled this "The Cost of Being Right," because there is a cost of being right all the time in a marriage relationship. This isn't your business. This isn't your work. This is your marriage. And
Mhm.
so knowing that, stepping out of that win-lose and looking at how does our marriage win and getting on the same page with that, and then using some of the things we've talked about today, it'll make a difference. You don't have to stay stuck in that cycle. You don't have to stay stuck in
Mm.
that. You can get to where your marriage really is the thing that wins time after time after time. And that's going to help get you that awesome marriage that we talk about all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. You do not have to stay stuck. That's a great place to end today. And I do want to make you aware too, we have some resources available for you specifically to get you unstuck, to stop those cycles of insanity if you are stuck in that today. So the first one we have is a free 8 guidelines for fighting fair in your marriage webinar, which Dr. Kim is teaching. And so this is just a free internet webinar. You'll come and watch, get these 8 guidelines for fighting fair. And I think this is huge because a lot of the things we covered today, it's like it seems obvious once you've heard it, but until you hear it, you have no idea what you're doing wrong.
Right.
And so these guidelines are going to help make sure you're fighting right, and not creating more trouble with your conflict resolution or your arguments. And then we also have 2 donation-based resources which are available for a donation of any amount to the Ministry of Awesome Marriage. We have a conflict resolution cheat sheet which has 25 of Dr. Kim's best conflict solving tips. We also have a conflict resolution guide, and that's a fun one because it just starts off with a conflict assessment that you go through with your spouse. It's kind of a visual for where you're starting. And no matter where you're starting, it gives you some tips to clean up your conflict resolution and make sure you're not just arguing, you're not just in those terrible cycles, but that you are actually getting some resolution to those issues. So, to find any of those things, you can go to the links in today's show notes, wherever you're listening. Just click down below and you'll see all those links right there, because we would love to help you break these cycles and get unstuck. So thanks again for spending some time with us today. Have a great day and do something awesome for your marriage today.